South Park's penultimate episode of the year was also a Thanksgiving special, and definitely felt more like a classic town-wide romp than many of our 2025 episodes so far. But despite being a nice town-focused holiday story, they brought a ton of different aspects from various episodes this season together, and obviously still hit with some social and political commentary, despite giving us the absolute least amount of Trump we've gotten in any new episode since the season began. This felt to me like the most grounded and classic-feeling episode we've gotten in a minute, so let's dive into Season 28, Episode 4, Turkey Trot. And hey, if you like this breakdown, I've covered every single episode so far this season, and of course I'm going to cover the impending season finale, but I also have a ton of South Park episode, character, and lore breakdown videos across the channel, so if you like this, please consider subscribing. Hey, thanks. The opening of the episode is a pretty fun sort of town check-in scene as the Chamber of Commerce tries to determine how they'll fund this year's Turkey Trot. It sort of runs down a few aspects of different episodes of the year within this one scene, first referencing the fact that Randy used to be able to sponsor the event via Tegrity.
But as you know, we've recently all lost Tegrity.
This also checks in on Liu Kim and his Asian pop-up store, reminding people how he's still dealing with tariffs. And then our first check-in on Mykal since Got a Nut, which had such a vague ending that people weren't even sure if he ever made it back to South Park. But as it turns out, he's now a janitor at the South Park Chamber of Commerce. I wonder if they had maybe considered what to do with Mykal after the unclear ending to the second episode, but couldn't land on anything interesting, and then maybe decided to give us this check-in before the finale. But this all also ties into this episode's story and commentary pretty cleanly, as despite having a job, Mykal, along with just about everyone else, are all struggling to make ends meet in South Park. Which brings us to the new sponsor for the Turkey Trot.
They're giving money to everyone else. Why not us?
So, yep, it's Saudi Arabia. They come in and they offer a $5,000 prize for the South Park Turkey Trot. This is obviously referencing a couple things. For one, the fact that Saudi Arabia's public investment fund has been potentially bidding on the sale of Warner Brothers, the studio, which is insane. And of course, the recently maligned Riyadh Comedy Festival, in which the Saudi Arabian government paid handsomely to get a ton of comedians over there for their event, with a lot of those comedians being intensely scrutinized for taking money from such a dubious and morally corrupt source. Obviously, the way the episode portrays this isn't a one-to-one comparison, because frankly, basically every one of those comedians that went to Riyadh was already doing just fine. They did not need the Saudi Arabian money. But this episode basically concedes that everyone in South Park is struggling so immensely that they're willing to look the other way in order to win that money.
If anybody's gonna get money from Saudi Arabia, it should be us.
This also feels like it parallels what we saw in the Halloween episode, with Stan being so willing to go through with the crypto rug pull scheme and make some money off of other people for himself, really showcasing dubious morals to pull himself out of the tough position that he and his family are in. But obviously this time it extends to countless other people in South Park. There were actually some really interesting things to note in the Turkey Trot sign-up sequence. Obviously they're showcasing characters from previous episodes this year, like Mykal and Liu Kim. We even got a wing cameo during the Turkey Trot, but we also see Jimbo sign up with Ned, who is in a wheelchair and sports these major scars on his face. This is really interesting because it's sort of retconning a retcon that keeps going back and forth. In Season 22's Time to Get Cereal, Ned is mauled by Man Bear Pig. The last we see him in that season is in Bike Parade, in a wheelchair, sporting the same pattern of these wounds here, though they haven't scarred over yet. But then later, we see Ned in a crowd shot at the end of the vaccination special, celebrating with no wheelchair or wounds. Then, we see him at Shady Acres retirement in the post-COVID special, which obviously takes place in the future. He's just in a few background shots, but it appears that he is both in a wheelchair and he has remnants of the scarring on his face still, though they have faded quite a bit. This is also an older character model, obviously. But then, in the episode Japanese Toilet, he appears looking normal in a crowd shot during Stan's speech near the end of the episode. I think ultimately the answer to the back and forth is that for these big crowd scene shots, animators inserted Ned as a filler character without anyone realizing the continuity issue. But this is now a brand new character model for Ned, the first time we've seen current day Ned in the wheelchair with these wounds having scarred over, which I expect also means this is going to be the definitive model for Ned moving forward. A pretty neat detail. Honestly, I never even noticed this continuity in post-COVID before this episode. I went back and did the research for this and was kind of blown away. I wasn't even sure we had seen him at all after Bike Parade, which is fair because he's kind of hidden in all of these shots. Alright, let's get out of that South Park lore hole and back to the episode. This one also follows a semi-classic South Park pattern. Cartman presuming something racist about Tolkien. I mean, we've seen this many times in episodes like Cartman Finds Love or Christian Rock Hard.
Token, how many times do we have to go through this? You're black, you can play bass. I'm getting sick of your stereotypes.
This time, Cartman decides that they need to get Tolkien on their Turkey Trot team because obviously he is a good runner, and he describes his expertise in this kind of science pretty specifically here.
I happen to be an expert in race science, you guys.
It's actually kind of crazy that this was the first episode released after my friend Toonrific Tariq dropped his big 50-minute video on Tolkien. He broke down all the ways the show has used him over the years, and it's an incredibly great video. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it, but it's pretty funny to immediately deliver a kind of by-the-numbers use of Tolkien right after his video that's breaking down exactly how they've done this over the years. Once again, making me wonder if Matt and Trey watch these videos. Despite Tolkien insisting he's not a runner, he eventually agrees to join the boys' team. And all things considered, this episode really does feel like it's both building really naturally on the various plot points of this entire season and delivering some classic-feeling South Park storylines. A town-wide event that leads to Cartman making dubious and racist schemes. I mean, that's classic South Park, right? Particularly after a season that has devoted nearly half of each episode to the ongoing Trump and Satan storyline. Speaking of, I think this one did a really great job tying the Trump stuff in naturally while refraining from taking us away from the South Park focus. This episode put a spotlight on Pete Hegseth and Trump's quote-unquote Department of War. Hegseth heads to South Park to try and get Peter Thiel out of prison after he was previously arrested, and they really tear into Hegseth here. And I don't know how you can blame them. I mean, is there any more of an insecure move than renaming the Department of Defense the Department of War? Hegseth has seemed to have turned off a lot of military with his antics, and South Park opts here to showcase his try-hard attitude and obsession with creating influencer-like content to post on the official administration social media pages, which is a real thing. Just go check out the Department of War Twitter. I cannot believe the world we live in.
We don't stand down for anyone. Be sure to like and subscribe. All right, let's do this.
So our only real connection to Trump in this episode is that he has sent one of his stooges into South Park. We only see Trump on a brief phone call, which to me worked really well. It made sure to tie to that ongoing storyline to a degree, while also maintaining that focus on the town shenanigans. Now, the South Park police's antics are always undoubtedly funny, and this was once again a great example of this as they just fully put Hegseth on his ass. I don't normally cheer for the South Park police, but this is an instance where I'm kind of taking their side. Pretty funny that they just have absolutely zero respect for his authority. And the way all of these storylines coalesce feels pretty fun and natural as well. Obviously, the big event is the Turkey Trot itself, with the entire town trying to get that 5K from the Saudis. But Hegseth sees an opportunity when he completely misreads what the Turkey Trot is.
Holy shit, we've got an Antifa uprising!
I also liked that they looped Kristi Noem back into this one, connecting back to the earlier part of the season, leading to a sort of influencer dick measuring contest between Hegseth and Noem. The only character with any real integrity in this episode is actually Tolkien. He just doesn't show up to the Turkey Trot because he doesn't feel right about potentially taking money from the Saudis. Literally, everybody else in the episode jumps at the chance, but Tolkien sits it out. The way Cartman tries to justify it is fully commentary on how some of the comedians that went to the Riyadh Festival tried to justify their own participation, while also taking a swipe at said comedians.
If Saudi Arabia is out paying for sporting events, they're not out hacking up reporters and inviting Pete Davidson to come do comedy.
Cartman's plan just devolves into stealing Tolkien's Xbox to lure him to the Turkey Trot. Funny side note, anyone else think it's bizarre that they used an Xbox 360 model here? I mean, we know they at least designed an Xbox One model for the Black Friday trilogy. Using a 360 in 2025 is wild. That specific model is literally 20 years old. But I feel like the Trot was a really great event/location for all of these things to come together. Obviously, the entire town competing desperately to get that money, Cartman luring Tolkien to the event, Hegseth tear-gassing the runners thinking they're Antifa. It is pretty interesting how the show has kind of systematically run down the list of every major figure in the Trump administration and just dismantled them. And it's particularly interesting how vastly different their commentary and satire of each person has been. But I liked that this was just a plain old attack on this guy's character. He is such a tryhard, and they exemplified that in their portrayal, ending in their Danger Zone parody, Pete Hegseth is a fucking douche. Not a particularly creative parody, but accurate. The absolute highlight of the climax here for me is how the Turkey Trot ended. Tolkien proved that he actually wasn't a good runner, but still, in the mess of tear gas, as he backed away from Cartman with his Xbox, just accidentally won the entire thing.
Oh, God damn it.
Tolkien was literally the only person in the entire town who took any kind of moral stance against the Saudi backing of the Turkey Trot, and in the end, he won, and collected the check. I truly laughed so hard at how angry he is up on stage as they hand him that giant check. The Hegseth story didn't particularly wrap up in an exciting way, but again, I enjoyed seeing Yates kind of just kick his ass into jail, placing him with heel, and probably setting the stage for part of the finale to a degree. Overall, I feel like this episode actually did exactly what I'd been hoping to see plenty out of this season almost the entirety of the year. This is a great town and kid-focused story. It had natural implementation of some of the ongoing Trump stuff without taking away the focus from the town, and it gave us a really fun classic Cartman and Tolkien standoff. However, they also made this move with only a single episode remaining, which is an interesting choice. I would have really expected them to have been table setting for the big serialized finale, in which I am certain we can expect the birth of the Antichrist, and there are definitely still some big pieces on the table. In a way, this episode sort of brought a lot of the town-focused storylines together, not as some sort of big climax, but as a way to tie them together via commentary, and I expect this season finale will be the one that really lays out the end of this serialized Trump, Satan, Antichrist story. I am still fully expecting it to revolve around not just the Trump administration White House stuff, but hopefully also Jesus. Since the last we saw him, he had completely transformed into Power Christian mode. He needs to have a sort of moral resurrection, we'll call it, in order to come out of this weird bunk he's in. I expect Thiel and Hegseth being in South Park jail will facilitate the sort of showdown of everything in South Park, and I'm still curious if the whole Cartman 6-7 possession thing will play a part with Thiel and the Antichrist story. There's a lot of pieces here, and they might ignore some of them, we'll see. This has just been a really interesting season, and it's felt like Matt and Trey have sort of been trying to balance their preference for classic South Park stories and their stubborn heels in the sand attitude in regards to all of their anti-extremist rhetoric, with obviously their stubbornness sort of winning out most of the time. But I sort of always respect their interplay with the audience and attempts to go the path that speaks to them most, even if I have maybe found the Trump focus pretty exhausting this year. But I think a strong finale could really make me feel positively overall about this season. It seems like the stage is set and the pieces are in place for something that could be really satisfying. But what did you think of South Park's penultimate episode of the year? Was it sufficiently classic South Park for you, or was it too little too late? Obviously, you can expect to meet me right here in 2 weeks to cover the season finale. I'll catch you next time. Peace.
I stay mellow watching Johnny two cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny two cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.